Well, Xi Jinping's travelling to Europe with three main goals. Firstly, defend his economic policy and push back against accusations of overcapacity. Secondly, defend Beijing's business with Moscow and see how far he can go. And finally, trying to create a little bit of tension or friction within Europe. Now,
why might China's plan to boost its economy not work? For years, the CCP has been attempting to improve China's economy, but without much success. China's economy is struggling, even though the International Monetary Fund and others are urging them to fix it. China's economy has been doing really well for the last 30 years, growing a lot and lifting the country from being poor to being pretty well off. In 2022, China's GDP was $18.3 trillion, which is 73% of the United States GDP. That's a big jump from 1990 when it was only 7% of the US GDP. China achieved all this without some things that economists usually say are really important for growth, like a good banking system, strong rules and systems, a market-driven economy, and a government that's democratic and open. Even when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, China's economy kept going strong, despite all the problems happening at home and around the world. Some people have always said China's economy would crash soon, pointing out lots of weaknesses. China's growth has mainly come from investing in things like buildings and land, which has been paid for by a not-so-great banking system. Now, with lots of debt inside the country, the property market getting shaky, and fewer people available to work, some experts say China's economy is finally going to hit a big problem. But they're probably not right. While there are some issues with how China's been changing things, like not fixing up its systems and sometimes not being clear about the role of the government versus the market, and there are worries about money and property, it doesn't mean everything's going to fall apart. Each person in China now makes about $13,000 a year, which is around 17% of what people in the US make. Back in 1990, it was less than 2%. China has been a huge part of the world's economic growth in recent years, making up 35% of the total global GDP growth, while the US was at 27%. Instead of changing things up, China's sticking to what it knows best, selling stuff to other countries. They're doubling down on this strategy, calling it new and putting even more focus on it. So let's chat about China's economic troubles and their latest attempt to fix them. People are buzzing about their new plan, which focuses on boosting their productivity. But this plan is stirring up a lot of talk, not just in Washington but all around the world. Before we dig into why China's recovery plan is stirring up so much controversy, let's understand the basics of China's economic mess. Economists have different views, but many think China is facing several crisis problems with property, high youth unemployment, and deflation. These issues are all tangled up. The main issue is that Chinese families don't have much money to spend, and they don't buy enough stuff within China. This is a big deal because the money people make from their jobs isn't enough for them to spend on things they need. They make a lot of stuff and sell it abroad, but people in China can't afford to buy much of it. This creates a problem because it messes with China's economy. Not only does this mess with China's economy, but it also affects the whole world. China sells more stuff to other countries than it buys from them. It's like a seesaw. If Chinese workers make tons of stuff but don't buy much themselves, the balance tips. If Chinese workers don't earn enough to buy what they make, they have to sell it to other countries. Places like the US and UK buy a lot of it because they don't put many limits on what they import. But things are shifting lately. The problem isn't that China sells a ton of stuff. That's normal for a big economy. It's more about the imbalance. China sells more stuff to other countries than it buys because people in China don't have enough money to buy as much from abroad. If Chinese workers earned more and China bought more from other countries, people wouldn't fuss as much about China's trading habits. Let's look at the US, for example. Take the trade tensions between China and the US over solar panels, for example. Some US politicians are concerned that we rely too much on Chinese solar panels. But if Chinese people bought more stuff from other countries like the US to balance out their booming sales of solar panels, it wouldn't be such a big issue. Then, Americans could just sell other things like wind turbines to Chinese people who have more money to spend. This would balance out the trade and create a good relationship where both countries need each other. But unfortunately, that's not how things are going. But China is making everything from solar panels to wind turbines and more. Even though they're selling a lot, they're not buying as much from other countries. So businesses outside China are having a hard time. Because China isn't buying much from other places, everyone is relying on China for almost everything. Governments around the world have noticed this and are starting to protect their industries, so you can see where this is going.
All these are really aimed at juicing home sales, raising demand for apartments. And on both of these strategies, the government has only been partially successful so far. We're still early days, but we're not really yet seeing a V-shaped recovery in housing demand. It's really been a bit of a slog in recent months to get consumer confidence back into the market and stabilize home demand.
Now let's talk about China's two options. Because people in China aren't buying enough, their economy is suffering, and they have this controversial trade surplus. So China has two choices to fix this mess. They could get people to buy more stuff. They could do this by giving households some extra money or making sure people feel secure with things like healthcare and job support. When people feel safer, they're more likely to spend money instead of saving it. This could also help China balance out its trade surplus and ease tensions with other countries. Another option is for China to stick to what it knows and boost industries that make things for export, like manufacturing. But if we're following the analysis we just talked about, this won't fix the main issue, China's economy. It might even make the trade surplus bigger and cause more problems with trade partners. A while back, it seemed like China was leaning towards the first option. They cut interest rates a bit, and local governments brought in some measures to boost people's trust in spending money. But lately, the CCP stepped in and said they're going with the second option. They're talking about these new productive forces as the solution. They want to keep focusing on making stuff to sell. They're not going for consumer stimulus but sticking to manufacturing, with a focus on high-tech stuff like electric vehicles, semiconductors, and AI. As you can imagine, this plan isn't sitting well with everyone, especially the US, as seen during her recent visit to China. House Trade Secretary Janet Yellen cautioned about China making too much stuff, which she thinks could lead to geopolitical issues. She suggested China should do what the US did during the pandemic, boost consumer spending. But of course, the CCP doesn't see eye to eye on this. They don't think China's trade surplus is because they're playing unfairly. Instead, they say it's because Chinese companies are just better at making things, like using more robots. They also think it's unfair for the US and others to criticize China for focusing on manufacturing and helping their industries when the US does the same thing. The US is also protecting its industries with laws like the Inflation Reduction Act. China says they need their big industry plan to go green, especially since other developed countries aren't making much progress. The CCP says having too much capacity in green industries is good because the world needs a lot of solar panels and wind turbines. But even though this makes sense, it can still annoy some people. In Washington, policymakers are worried about American manufacturing going down. But for American shoppers, things are okay. They have a lot of buying power because the dollar is strong, so they can keep buying cheap stuff from China. The countries in the global south will feel it the most. China's big surplus means these countries can't sell as much stuff. Plus, with the dollar being strong, they can't buy as much. And to top it off, China's not lending as much money anymore. Also, because China's economy is slowing down, they're not lending as much money. This means countries in the global south can't borrow as easily, especially since many of the loans from China aren't being paid back. So even though there are reasons related to security and the environment for China's new strategy, it might not make other countries happy. China's economy has mostly grown because of lots of investment, which has been paid for by a banking system that's not so great. This got even more intense after the big financial crisis that started in 2008. From 2009 to 2010, about 2/3 of China's growth came from more investment. In the past few years, regular people spending money has become the main way the economy grows. The services industry now makes up more than half of all the money made in a year and nearly half of all the jobs. Even though the journey has been bumpy, China has made some big steps in changing how its economy works, with people spending money in service jobs becoming more important than just making things. Despite being a fast-developing country, China has a lot on their plate. Do you think this is true? Do let us know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. Until next time, see you all.